Greetings, my fellow Fright Fiends. It's your buddy Boogeyman Ben here for a new episode of Boogeyman Ben's Horror Zone, and today's video is part 3 of my top 100 horror films of all time. I'm really having a blast doing this series. Like I said in the last two videos, I will be publishing one of these every week leading up to Wednesday, October 31st. Today's video will be focusing on numbers 80 through 71. So let's go ahead and get started. So number 80 on my list is going to go to a relatively new film. That would be Jigsaw. So this is the 8th film in the Saw franchise. This came out in October of 2017. And while it's not my favorite Saw in the franchise, I really liked it, and I think it was a step above Saw 4 and Saw 7, or Saw the Final Chapter. I had a lot of fun with this film. I talked in my review about some of the issues I had with it, primarily being that I thought that the what we've come to expect from the Saw franchise with the over-the-top violence and gore, I understand why they did it, to just give it a different tone. You had different filmmakers, but for someone that, you know, goes into these films with a certain expectation and a certain kind of, you know, I know what I want out of a Saw film, that was a little bit disappointing that it was so trimmed down when compared to the other films in the franchise. But other than that, I thought it was a really good story, and I really liked the twist, you know, everybody knows there's going to be a twist at the end of the film, but I really thought it played out well, and it made sense, and I just had a blast with it, and I think it's a terrific film. So number 80 will go to Jigsaw. Number 79 on my list is going to go to Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. I did a review of this film last year, talked about, you know, like what I like, what I don't like about this film. And next to Halloween Resurrection, this will always be my second least favorite film in the franchise. But I said last year I love every Halloween film, despite some of the issues that some of them have. The crown jewel of this one is Danielle Harris. She's fantastic, as well as the amazing, great Donald Pleasance, who, even though I thought they made his character of Dr. Loomis a little too over the top in this one, I still think he turns in a fantastic performance. Also, can't say enough great things about Don Shanks. I think he's a great Michael Myers, very intimidating, very menacing. The mask doesn't bother me. I think it actually looks kind of cool in this one. It doesn't bother me like some people. The biggest issues for me, I'm not a big fan of the Tina character. No disrespect to Wendy Kaplan, who played her. Also, I was really unhappy that they killed off the Rachel character so soon in the franchise. And the issue with the Myers house looking like this big gothic mansion didn't make sense to me. A very bad continuity. But there's some really cool moments in this film. I love the opening. I love the scene where Michael's chasing Jamie through the field in the car. Some of the atmosphere is really good. It has some really good mood to it. Michael attacking the couple in the barn with the farm equipment like the pitchfork and the sai and all that stuff. There's some really cool moments in the film, and the final showdown in the Myers house is really cool, despite the fact that the house looks nothing like it did in the other films. So yeah, all of that said, you know, I still enjoy the film, still enjoy watching it. A couple issues aside, but still a fun film. Number 78 on my list is going to go to Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master. I have such a great recollection of this film and seeing it in the movie theater. I was 14 years old when this movie came out. It was literally 2 weeks before I started my freshman year of high school. All of my friends, we had all been in Catholic school. We were all kind of being separated now because we were going to different schools. So this was kind of like our final hurrah as friends. We'd been friends for 5 years at this point because I started going to Catholic school in 4th grade. So I was in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with the same guys and the same girls, and it was really fun. And we all met up, mostly the guys met up to go see this one. I forget whose parent it was to get us into the theater, because of course we were all 13 and 14 years old. This was a rated R movie, but it was the most anticipated film of that summer. We were all waiting for it. And I remember I was the only one that was tall enough to buy a ticket and get in. I remember 3 of my friends were too little, too short, so we had to get the mom that was there, whoever said mom was, to come out and help my friends get into the movie theater. So that was like hilarious. But yeah, I remember I was so proud of myself that at 14 years old I was tall enough to look like I was 16, 17 years old, I guess, to the ticket taker. But I had a lot of fun with Nightmare on Elm Street 4. It hasn't sort of aged well with me. Nothing to just say disrespectful of it, but this is where Freddy turned into a cartoon character a little too much for me as I got older. It was fun when I was a kid because I was terrified of Freddy from the first 3 films, and in this one, he was more digestible. He was more like I could watch this film and not be so terrified. But as I've gotten older, this is where I feel like they made him too much of the star, and they took the emphasis off of the characters, the victims, or the Elm Street kids. And, you know, it sort of lessened the impact a bit. of how terrifying Freddy was, and it made him too much of a jokester, in my opinion. That's what I feel like as I've gotten older, but I still have a blast with this film. I love the cast in this, like Andres Jones, Ken Sagos, who I'm a huge fan of, Rodney Eastman, Tuesday Knight, Lisa Wilcox, Danny Hassel, and Brooke Thies, who I was really honored to meet last year at the Sinister Creature Con. And I brought my, she's the girl that gets turned into the cockroach when she's working out, but I brought my, you know, little, I think it was a Mezco figure of her, one of the only Elm Street kids or Elm Street victims that has been made into a toy. As the cockroach, and she signed it. She was a blast. She's actually someone that really loves horror movies, and she was telling me about watching them with her kids and stuff like that. She was just an awesome lady. One of my, the best convention experiences I've had meeting her. Yeah, there's some great parts of this film. The thing that I always had a hard time with at first was that the Elm Street kids got killed off so quickly after you became such a big fan of them with Dream Warriors. I hated that Kincaid and Joey and Kirsten got killed so early in the film. But I think Lisa Wilcox was fantastic as Alice, and I loved the fight between her and Freddy at the end at the church. But there's some great set pieces in this, and it's still a fun film. Like I said, I didn't like that they made the Freddy character too much of a comedian. Little one-liners here and there, like it was in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 2, and very small ones in the original, but it just was too much, a little too over the top, and that's why it's a little low on my list at this point. But still a fun film, and a terrific experience as a kid, and a terrific experience meeting Brooke Thies. So I can't say enough great things about it. Still a fun film that I enjoy. Number 77 on my list is going to go to a film that I've never talked about and I always have wanted to, but it's Breakdown, starring the amazing Kurt Russell and the late great J.T. Walsh. This is a film that deals with a couple that are relocating from Boston to California. Their car breaks down, and this trucker offers to help them go to a gas station, call somebody to help them with their car. Kurt Russell is the husband, and his wife is played by Kathleen Quinlan. Kathleen Quinlan goes with the trucker, played by J.T. Walsh, to go get help for them. Kurt Russell eventually gets the car going and goes to where they say they're going to meet, and she's not there. So the rest of the film is him trying to find out what happened to his wife. And it is one of the most harrowing, terrifying films I can remember watching. This movie came out in 1997, and I remember watching it on, I think I rented it on tape that year, because I had heard nothing but great things about it. It was directed by Jonathan Mostow, who who directed what I think is a very underrated film, Terminator 3. But this is a terrific film if you guys haven't seen it. It's one of my favorite Kurt Russell films of all time. This is one of his best performances, and he's terrific in this film. And J.T. Walsh, who I miss terribly, he passed away, I believe he passed away 20 years ago, but he is terrific. It's one of his last roles, and he is terrific in the film. And I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but this film holds up so well and still freaks me out. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Completely 100% recommend, and I might actually put it into one of my underrated horror film segments. Everybody needs to check out Breakdown. Number 76 on my list is going to go to Child's Play 2. Not as high for me as a lot of people. A lot of people would, I've seen some people put this over the original Child's Play. The thing I really like about this film and respect is that it's very different from the first Child's Play. My problem with it, and I think I did it when I did a retrospective on the Child's Play series a long time ago, I talked about the fact that I didn't like the fact that Mrs. Barkley wasn't in it, and that Andy was with a different family. But I love Jenny Gutter. She was fantastic in American Werewolf in London. I thought she did a great job here. I'm a huge fan of Christine Elise. Loved her on Beverly Hills 90210, and she is fantastic in this as Kyle. And of course, Alex Vincent does a great job as Andy. Just a terrific actor. And who cannot say enough great things about Brad Dourif as Chucky? This is where Chucky really comes to life more. He was a lot in I think what works so well in the first Child's Play is that Chucky wasn't really seen on screen as much. It was more like you'd see a shadow or him running real fast by camera. In this, he's front and center. The animatronics in this look fantastic, especially for this being the early 90s. But yeah, I still have a blast with this. I think the showdown in the toy factory at the end is one of the best set pieces. Just absolutely terrific. And Like I said, it's not as high on my list as a couple of other Child's Play films that you'll find out about as this countdown goes on, but still a film that I enjoy watching. And a side story to this and why I never saw this movie in the theater. I've never seen any Child's Play film in the theater, none of them. I was supposed to go see this one with my buddies. They were supposed to pick me up. I think my friend Mike had finally started driving. I didn't have my driver's license yet. This film came out my junior year of high school, and I had my permit, but I didn't have my driver's license yet, and him and some other buddies were supposed to pick me up at my grandmother's. They never showed up. Literally never showed up. So I was standing there waiting for them to, we didn't have cell phones or beepers or any of that shit back then. And so I had no way of contacting them, and they all went to the fucking movies without me because they couldn't find my grandmother's house. Yeah, I was really pissed and heartbroken that they never came to get me. I still remember standing outside my grandmother's house waiting for my friends to show up. That's sort of a sad ending to this, talking about a film that I actually love. But I actually really love this film. I'm saddened I never got to see it in the movie theater, but still have a good time with it, even though it's not as high on my list as some of the other films in the franchise. So, Child's Play 2. Number 75 on my list is going to go to 1941's The Wolf Man, starring the amazing Lon Chaney Jr. I absolutely love this film, and it's The Wolf Man is my favorite Universal monster. This is the complete Legacy collection, so it has all the films in the werewolf franchise. But that first one, the original 1941 film, has always been my favorite. I love the setting, the look. I love Lon Chaney Jr. And I just love the look of the Wolfman. And it's such a tragic, sad movie, even though it's got some horrific moments. The character is so well defined. And Lon Chaney Jr. plays him perfectly, and I love the makeup in this. Just absolutely fantastic and terrifying. And easily always going to be one of my favorite movies of all time. Just absolutely fantastic. Number 74 on my list is going to go to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Prior to the 2003 remake, I had only seen this film maybe 1 or 2 times at the most. But after seeing that remake, I really wanted to revisit the original and completely fell in love with it. It's such a great film, so disturbing. Gunnar Hansen is fantastic as Leatherface. I also love Jim Siedow, Edwin Neal, Marilyn Burns. Fantastic cast. Such a insane movie to watch, and just everything about it is so genuine and authentic. And Tobe Hooper, rest in peace to him and so many that have passed on from this film. He just does such a fantastic job directing this, and you just feel everything these characters are feeling. You feel how hot and grungy it is. You can smell the rotten food and the dinner scene, and it's just in that house with all of the bones and the feathers and the chickens in the cages and everything. It's just so well done. Just a terrific film. Can't say enough great things about it. Absolutely love this film. Number 73 on my list is going to go to Scream 2. This was such an event movie. I remember going to see this one opening night, 1997, with my girlfriend at the time, having a blast with it. It was so much fun to see this in the movie theater, and I had been a fan of the first Scream when this came out. I had seen the first Scream in the theater, I think, 3 times. Because it just continued to play throughout the entire year. It was such a huge hit. And seeing Scream 2, I loved it, but didn't love it as much as Scream 1. I have a couple issues with the film, nothing too major. The biggest one for me, and why it's not higher on the list for me, is I just didn't like the way that one character was treated throughout this film. He was, and it's the character of Randy, who, played by the amazing Jamie Kennedy, was my favorite character in the first Scream, and is my favorite character in this one. The way that he was killed off unceremoniously, it just kind of pissed me off, because it was a shock, and yes, it got you, and you were like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. But then at the end, you're just like, he's the voice of the horror fan. And he was the one that was, he was me growing up. He was the one telling everybody about the rules with the horror films and all that. And the fact that he was just killed off the way he was, and you didn't have that voice. Yes, they kind of brought him back in a cheap way for Scream 3, which it was cool, but at the same time, if they would have just kept the character alive, it would have been better. Or if he could have turned out to be the killer, like I said in my when I talked about Scream 3. I just didn't like the way that he was treated, and that's why this film is, everything about this film is great. Other than that, I just really hated the fact that Randy was killed in this one. And I'm sorry if I'm spoiling it for people who haven't seen it, but this movie's been out for over 20 years, so it's like I figured now is the time to talk about it. But now it's okay to talk about that. But yeah, I was very disappointed in that. But otherwise, I had a blast seeing this in the theater. I love everyone in this cast. Neve Campbell is still one of the best scream queens ever, and she is such a tour de force in this. Does a terrific job. And then I love Courtney Cox in it. She was great. David Arquette was great. It was nice to see Jerry O'Connell in this. Liev Schreiber's Cotton Weary character comes out of the shadows a little bit more. He had a brief appearance in the first one. It was nice to see him in this more. Really liked the way that he played the character. He's one of my favorites in this as well. Just a terrific movie, a lot of fun, great gore, great kills, really shocking ending, and a lot of fun. Just wish they wouldn't have killed Randy. Number 72 on my list is going to go to the original 1980 Friday the 13th. And like I talked about earlier this year when I broke down how I would rank the Friday the 13th films, this one is just above Jason Goes to Hell. I love this film. I respect what it brought to the table. I'm glad that it exists and it helped create my favorite horror icon of all time. But this film, like I've said, and even, Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham have talked about, that they pretty much wanted to do a ripoff of Halloween. And as much as I love this film, there's elements of this that just come off like a ripoff of Halloween. That's not to say it's not a great film, and that's not what I'm trying to say when I say that. The direction is sufficient. It's good. I really love the effects by the amazing Tom Savini. I really love Adrienne King as Alice. She's fantastic. The main performance in this that I think makes this film shine is Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees. Absolutely terrific. One of the greatest screen villains of all time. Someone that you can sympathize with and also fear. She just brought so much to the table. She defined that character and made her a horror icon, and I absolutely love her in this film. And this is the start to my favorite horror film franchise of all time. Just not as high on the list as the other films. Number 71 on my top 100 horror films of all time list will go to Tales from the Hood. I love this film, and I'm so thankful that Scream Factory put out this fantastic special edition last year. I hadn't seen this film in probably 10 to 15 years before I picked it up last year on Blu-ray. The film on DVD was impossible to find. Every once in a while it would be on cable, but to buy the original DVD release of this film, you were going to have to shell out about $70 to $80. And it was crazy. That was for a used copy because they discontinued the original run of the DVD release. But this film is absolutely fantastic. It was marketed completely wrong, though. There are some great heavy themes in this film that are handled so well. Yes, you have some over-the-top performances like by Clarence Williams III, who I think is one of the scariest men to ever walk the earth. There's just something intimidating about that man. And I think he's so great in this role of Mr. Sims, who runs the funeral home, where these three gangsters go to retrieve a lost drug stash. And then they hear these different stories about racial injustice and physical abuse and gang violence. And it's all done such a respectful manner. It's fantastic. If you guys have not seen it, definitely pick up the Scream Factory release. You won't regret it. Absolutely fantastic film. So that is going to be it for part 3 of my top 100 horror films of all time. I hope everyone is enjoying this series. It seems like people are. I'm really loving the feedback. But let me know what you guys think about this segment, part 3 of this series, down in the comments section below. Let me know what you guys think of some of the films that I talked about. And stay tuned for part 4 of this series coming next week. I appreciate everyone supporting this. Take it easy. Stay scared as always. Peace.